Hello and welcome to Daily Politics, reaching you from Trust TV here in Abuja. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Suleiman. Today, our focus is on the National Development Plan of this government. The National Development Plan is tailored towards achieving the government's target of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. Under this plan, it envisages certain issues about growth, jobs, infrastructure, and many, many other things. Now, our interest in this program is entirely on the very fact that in the last 20, 30 years, no one has even heard of a national development plan in Nigeria. So what does this mean? And especially, why is it coming so late in the life of the administration? Is it just another, you say it, or is it something serious? Is it a legacy-defining project that the government wants to leave behind, even if it doesn't have time to execute it? With me to discuss these issues is, of course, the Senior Special Presidential Assistant on Public Affairs, Mr. Ajuri Ngelari. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So, but before we go on, we'll take a minute to bring you, just a minute's break. We'll be right back.
This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV, and we're discussing the government's National Development Plan. And with me is Mr. Ajuri Ngelari, who is Senior Special Assistant on Public Affairs to President Muhammadu Buhari. You're much welcome, sir.
Privileged to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So the very first question most Nigerians will be asking, particularly people who follow issues of economic development and who are interested in the government's overall economic plan, is why is government waiting this long? A government is leaving in 18 months and then is starting a project that will last beyond 10 years. What does that say about that government?
Thank you very much. I think first and foremost, if what you have described is the reality of what we have been doing, then I think it would say very poor things about the government.
Okay.
Fortunately, the reality is a bit different than that, in the sense that this National Development Plan is not the first National Development Plan brought into bear by President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. In fact, it's the second. You may recall that there was first the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, which ran from 2016 to 2020. So that was the first 4-year plan, which we implemented and executed. And really, a nation that does not plan really has no future to be proud of. In the sense that one has to, just as a good household would operate, one must be able to plan each and every day in view of a broader context, in view of a broader picture of where it is that you want to go as a nation. President Muhammadu Buhari, if I'm not mistaken, I believe I'm not, when I say that he's the first president in the history of the country, civilian or military head of state, rather, that would have brought into fruition two different national development plans, one fully executed, but one that will be at least partially executed by the time he leaves office.
Thank you. But doesn't that say something even about the government itself? Does that not show that if you have two national development plans, then it probably says that maybe the first one was not working?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
That's not correct at all. If you look at the greatest development story in human history, economic development story, you'd be looking at the People's Republic of China.
Sure.
The People's Republic of China, they do not operate 50-year, 100-year plans. They operate 5-5-5-5-5-year plans. The reason why they do that is because it allows you a more narrow picture to define whether you have succeeded or failed in an area. If you have a plan that is a 50-year plan, it looks like pie in the sky. You say in 50 years we're going to be the #1 economy in the world, everybody is going to be driving a Lamborghini, and all is well. The question is, okay, how do you actually get there? What are the day-to-day steps? So that's why you break development plans into multiple year plans that are reasonable in nature, where you can say, look, over the course of the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, this is where we're going to be, and this is how we're going to be, how we're going to get there. That's what President Muhammadu Buhari has done. So the reason why you have a second plan is because, first and foremost, you have to understand that we are operating in a global context where you have 2 economic recessions and a once-in-a-century global pandemic, which nobody can plan for. Correct? So we now have a situation where we've gone through the ERGP. We recognize where we fell short, and we also recognize where we surpassed expectations.
So in which areas did you fall short?
Certainly, one of the major areas was having a scenario under the 8th National Assembly. Of course, when you want to execute development planning, it's based on the day-to-day minutiae of governance. What I mean by that is it requires an annual budget, an annual federal budget, for example. The states have their own budget, but in terms of federal budget, you have a National Assembly that's going to scrutinize the document. They're going to make their own amendments, and they're going to pass a budget. So when you have the 8th National Assembly, which ran for the most part through the life of the ERGP, 2016 to 2020, was predominated by the 8th Assembly. You were in this country. You saw what was going on then when the president had exposed to the Nigerian public budget padding scandals, really opening up the National Assembly for public scrutiny for the first time in our history, where Nigerians finally knew what was going on. It was because the president blew the whistle. That's number one. I need to land my point. It's very important. Aside from that, you also had a situation in which projects, you had budget cycles that were running from July. Right? They didn't want to get the president the budget on time. That affects the implementation of the budget when money is released to contractors, which means that contractors, instead of mobilizing 100% of their workforce, they're mobilizing 50 because they don't know when the next money is coming. There were a lot of problems. Now you've seen under the 9th National Assembly that we have consistently now, for the 3rd budget running, we've run January to December budget cycles for the first time in over a decade. That's not a coincidence. It's because we finally have executive legislative synergy, which allows us to effectively carry out and implement our development plan. So ERGP certainly was affected by that. That's the point I'm making.
I get your point that the ERCG was targeted at recovering from particularly the recession arising from the price of oil that went down. But the real issue here
and other factors.
And other factors. But during the life of the 8th National Assembly, for the most part of it, the leadership of that same the leadership of the National Assembly, because you are talking about legislative executive synergy, they were also within the APC. So some people would say it's probably poor governance skills on the part of your government to not have been able to carry that National Assembly along. And at the same time, now that you are having this, some people would say, well, it's because you now have a more pliable, a more rubber stamp kind of National Assembly.
What's very interesting, my brother, is that I was smiling when you were saying that because you, as a political watcher, understand very well that you can have multiple strands within one political party. If you look at the PDP today, you would recognize very well that in the same party where you have somebody as effective as Udom Emmanuel, you also have maybe some other people that are a bit more unsavory. So it cuts across. Of course, you make reference to the leadership of the 8th Assembly that led by Senate President Bukola Saraki at that time.
Yes.
You would recall that there's probably a good reason why there was an unprecedented sweep in Kwara State, where the entire PDP structure that was led by the same man you're referring to was swept out of office in one election. That's not a rejection by President Muhammadu Buhari, that's the rejection.
But that happens all the time in politics.
It's important that if you ask me a question, I'm able to answer without being interrupted.
Yes.
The key there was that if somebody is being rejected by their people, there's a reason why, and it has nothing to do with the president. It has to do with the opinion of the people. So why are they making that decision? Now, I believe that the reason why they made that decision was because some people made a calculation that it was more important to them to run for president than it was to actually command their office. And secondly, to the point you referenced, if you look at the beginning of what happened in 2015, June 9th, 2015, because I covered it, you would recall that how the leadership of the National Assembly was thrown up then was quite controversial. And in fact, you know very well that they relied heavily on PDP support to be able to see office. I'm referring to Bukola Saraki and Speaker Dogara at that time. So that's no secret. So obviously, if you get into a position on the back of opposition votes, then naturally you're going to do opposition bidding when you get there. And of course, by the time that term ended, you saw that they defected to the party they belonged to the entire time anyway. So I believe you know the truth.
Thank you. I do. But the bigger truth here is that that situation, you're trying to say, the implication of what you're saying is that the 8th National Assembly, the leadership of that assembly, particularly Bukola Saraki and Speaker Dogari, they held your government hostage in its...
I think it's important that you don't put words in my mouth. I think what's important is if you listen to my words and just take my words, what you would have heard from me is that the 8th National Assembly was led by politicians who eventually were defecting to a political opposition that they relied on in order to get into those offices. I think any discerning Nigerian who's being fair and unbiased in their approach to the issues would recognize that that has nothing to do with the leadership skills of President Muhammadu Buhari and has to do with how they got into power.
We're certainly fair and unbiased on this program, and I can assure you what we recall is that the president did say at the beginning, that he doesn't care whoever becomes the Senate President or the Speaker.
Yes,
and that led to the emergence of this man.
I think we
so
should
isn't that two political skills of the President?
There are a few things here. First of all, you brought me here to discuss national development plan.
Absolutely.
I'm not here to discuss politicians who've been rejected by their people. So
we're trying to say that the government cannot deflect the blame of its own failures at other politicians. That's the point we want to make clear.
Well,
if the government has failed in certain areas, excuse me, if the government has...
Are you making the point
I'm trying to bring that point out as a question, that if the government has failed in certain areas, it behoves the government to accept it.
My brother.
It behoves the government to accept that, okay, we did poorly in certain areas, like you rightly said.
Right.
But then to try to deflect blame on other people who are not here, it's my job to stand up for them.
No, it's not.
Especially when I feel that...
It's actually not your job to speak for the political opposition. Your job is to query the issue. Please, you're interrupting me again, please. This is becoming habitual.
Thank you.
The issue here is that if you have a budget that you're running and you know that appointments are being embargoed, you recall very well, if you remember what was happening at that time, these are facts. It's not opinion, it's not sensationalism, it's not even political. When I tell you that assembly stopped appointments of DGs and CEOs of major MDAs, essentially putting those critical government institutions into comatose because they wanted to fight the president for their own presidential agendas, I mean, you know what happened then. If I tell you that budgets that have now, since they left office, have now gone to January to December, we're going from July to December in those days, you will recall, or July to March or July to May in some cases, that is a fact. That is not an opinion. So I stick to facts. What I'm saying to you is that when we look at the ERGP, because that's what we're here to discuss, is National Development Planning, the ERGP was absolutely 100% impacted by the ability of the National Assembly at that time to release funds on time to allow us to carry out the plans of our administration. That is a fact. It is not sensational, it's not political, it's not election talk. That's the reality of what happened. Now, with that said, does that now mean that we will not come out and acknowledge the fact that, yes, this has impacted us? Of course we will. Now the question is moving into the next development plan. You recall that there's a 2-year gap, okay? You have the ERGP in 2016 to 2020. You also have the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025. But you have that 1-year plan, as it were, which was the Economic Sustainability Plan, which was put in place under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari and chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, a 1-year, 2.3 trillion naira stimulus, which went a long way in taking us out of recession much faster than everybody anticipated. You will recall IMF and many other internal Nigerian institutions had suggested and estimated that Nigeria would not exit recession until September of last year, September 2021, third quarter. We exited recession at the beginning of last year.
In March.
Yes, we put out the survival fund where we bailed out 500,000 MSMEs across all senatorial districts of the Federation with salary support for their staff, saving millions of jobs there. We put out the National Special Public Works Program where we had 1,000 youths in every local government area of the Federation being employed out, building rural feeder roads, sanitation and other exercises, receiving their stipend. So that was helpful. I mean, we had a series of interventions.
Thank you.
In between then.
Thank you very much. But that's really the problem, because you have most of these things in figures, in numbers.
Absolutely.
On paper. You know that this happened. You know, that, for example, throughout 2021,
right?
The economy was supposed to have grown from between 4 to 5%,
right,
and so on. But people are saying, you know, and with a lot of justification, that all of this is just numbers in the air. They cannot find...
What justification are you referring to?
For example, the cost of food, the cost of gas, the cost of so many things that ordinary Nigerians for whom these programs are targeted do not feel that these things actually happened. They didn't see their lives changing.
Well, first of all, listen.
Yes.
You have look at this. If you have a survival fund that was paid to 500,000 micro and small enterprises across the nation, and you have millions of Nigerians who work within these MSMEs who are receiving month after month of salary support, direct transfer into their accounts from the federal government of Nigeria. Are you telling me that they are saying that there was no impact when they have jobs that they wouldn't have had if not for federal government direct intervention? So look, I think we should not deceive people. What's important here is that are times hard? Absolutely. Are there challenges in the economy? Absolutely. I'm not here telling you that we're living in heaven on earth, there are no problems, that we have solved every problem in the last 6 years. That would be foolish. I think what I am absolutely telling you is that we have serious problems, but we are making serious, unprecedented efforts to be able to deal with those problems. If you look at what this is what I find as a bit of a marvel, is that before 2015, sometimes when you see something going on, you forget what it was before that thing started happening. Before 2015, Nigerians often do forget that there was nothing like a social investment program on a scale. Nothing like that. It didn't exist. It had never happened. Even if you go back to military regimes, it never happened. We're talking about a set of programs that are now impacting the lives of over 12 million Nigerians. You have 9 million school children on daily school feeding program, Monday through Friday. Burdens taken off of families in rural communities across the country. You have 3 million conditional cash transfer and conditional cash transfer and trader money, farmer money, and market money beneficiaries receiving direct cash stipend from the federal government of Nigeria, cash grant to be able to expand their businesses and their operations. You have 500,000 now gone to 1 million Empower beneficiaries who have been employed. Are you going to say that all of these people that have been impacted, their families, that they will say that they're not feeling it, that it's just propaganda, that it's just talk? My brother, that's deception. It's not true.
Thank you. But if all of these are true, if all of what you have said...
If all of these are true, these are verifiable.
I'm asking a question. If all of these are true...
Yes.
Then how come we still have the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's own agency, you know, of taking statistics about the economy and a bunch of other things in the country?
Right.
How come the poverty rate says that the poverty rate is at 40.1%, about 80 million Nigerians? For the very first time, that too is unprecedented, that for the very first time you have 80 million Nigerians falling below poverty line within the country. So if all of what you said earlier are true economically in Nigeria, how can you be having economic development and rising poverty at the same time?
I'm so glad that you asked this question. This is probably my favorite question so far. You see, understand something. When I mentioned just now the social investment beneficiaries, you'd recall that I gave you a very clear figure which can be verified anywhere you want to go. They can verify it for you. Down to the states, down to the local governments, how many beneficiaries of each, they can verify them for you. I said 12 million, didn't I? I think you heard me. I said 12 million. Now, how many Nigerians do we have? It's certainly more than 12 million, right? Meaning that if you have 200 million Nigerians, give or take, that 12 million is still a very long way away from dealing with all of the issues. Would you agree with me? So at no time has this administration or myself ever suggested that we are where we want to be, or that we have made it. What we are saying is that 12 million against the problem is much different than 0 against the 200 million. You understand, Ba? That's progress. I think anybody would acknowledge that. Now, I want to get to the core of your question, because I'm just starting. The core of your question deals with what is everybody knows to be false, in the sense of this. I'm very clear about what I'm saying now. The same statistics you cited from the NBS in terms of poverty rate, particularly unemployment rate, suggested or stated very explicitly that in 2013, 2014, 2015, somewhere in that range, I believe it was 2014, that the unemployment rate in the nation, this was from NBS, the same NBS you cited, that the unemployment rate in the nation was 8%. 8, that is 8, less than 10%, 8%. Okay?
Now it's at 3%.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Unemployment rate today is at 3%.
I'm coming. So 8% was the claim at that time, 2015 period. Now, I ask you this question.
Yeah.
As a Nigerian who is being honest, you're on TV, everybody's watching us, right? Now, would you suggest, would you agree that any time within your lifetime, in the last 30, 40 years, that in this country, Nigeria, that we're all living in 2015, 2014, 2013, that out of all of the adult population in the country, which is well over 100 million people, that 92 million out of 100 million working adults, even worse than that, I think it's something like 110 out of 130 million Nigerians, essentially, had access to jobs, had access to income in this country, and only 20 million out of 130 million didn't have access to any job as of 2014. That's how good things were. I'm coming, please. I need to land this point. That's how good things were in 2014, according to the NBS. We all know that that's a lie. We all lived in this country. We had siblings and friends and uncles, and we were in the society. We know that that's a lie.
Are you saying the NBS is lying?
I'm saying to you very clearly that the NBS has a serious problem with accurate data till today.
When it concerns you,
I'm coming, please. I'm not in any way deflecting of the challenges we have, which is why I've been very honest with you in saying that poverty is a problem. Job creation is something that we still have to do a lot towards, even though we've made more progress toward that than any previous administration combined. But the issue that we have now is that when we say 33 or 40% unemployment, right? There are a few things. Number one is the idea that every single year we have about 2 million young Nigerians coming out into the labor force, meaning that they come of age, they're 18, they're leaving secondary school or whatever the case may be, coming into the labor force. Meaning that every year, if government creates 2 million jobs a year, every single year, we're just breaking even. That means that unemployment is not rising and it's not falling, right? That's if we're creating 2 million jobs every single year to meet with what is joining the labor market every single year. The mistake that people make often, analysts, is the idea that when the unemployment rate goes up, it's because businesses are closing and people are leaving the country, which is absolute nonsense. What the reality is that because you have all of these people coming into the labor force year on year on year, and we have a huge youth population in this country continuing to come into the labor force, you have to create a certain number of jobs just to break even, just so that unemployment does not get worse. These are things that Nigerians, we still have a lot of communication to do for them to understand. But the last point I want to make on your question of the NBS is you're right. The NBS is a government agency. So it is absolutely our responsibility to position the NBS to be able to come out with accurate data that Nigerians can rely on. There's no question about that.
And you believe it's not doing that now?
And what I believe is this. The challenge we currently have, and this is why it's important for us to be honest with ourselves, the challenge we currently have is right now, my brother, as of today in Nigeria, any market you go to across the entire federation, all these markets, Sabongari, Wuse, Garki, you name them, Ariaria, name them. You go to those markets, you have a woman in the market selling textiles. She has a small stall in the marketplace. She even has 1 or 2 boys and girls working under her, proteges and all of that, right? She's paying them monthly salary of 20,000 naira, 25,000 naira. She's doing her business, she's paying her staff. They come every month, they come every day, they work with her. She takes home her pay. maybe 100,000, 150,000, however it is according to whatever she was able to sell that month. Now listen to this. Because she does not run, she has not formalized her business, meaning she's not registered with the CAC, she has not registered with the FIRS, right? She's not paying taxes, right? The NBS as of today qualifies her as 1, unemployed, and 2, not 1, unemployed, and 2, because she's unemployed, she's qualified as under the poverty line as of today in Nigeria. Right now, we have 30 million Nigerians, Nigerian businesses, MSMEs, that are not registered formally with the CAC and the FIRS, but they're conducting their business. Whether it's hawking on the street or whether it's actual market stalls or market boutiques or boutiques in the rural communities. So the challenge we have
actually,
right now...
that's not factually correct.
No,
because when the MBA is not factually correct at all.
I've had these discussions with the MBS.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
When the MBS takes statistics about who is employed, who is underemployed, and who is unemployed in Nigeria, what they do is they do surveys.
You're talking to somebody who has had a conversation with the statistician general on this issue.
I have to.
Yeah, so what you're saying is wrong.
Trust me, I have to. What they do, what they do entirely, what they do is they look at how many hours a week somebody is engaged in an employment. Any kind of employment, regardless of whether it's in the formal sector. Excuse me. Regardless, because what you are saying is any employment that is outside of. But it's a conversation between two people.
It's a conversation
between two people.
I should be able to land my point.
Okay, go ahead.
The point I was making before I was interrupted was not only do you have this issue with the data, which is absolutely true. There's nothing false about what I said. And I'll allow you to intervene in a moment.
Trust me, it's not factually correct.
No, it's absolutely factually correct. And I'm going to tell you why. On top of what I've just said is the fact that the NBS, I had a conversation directly with the statistician general. And what he said to us, I'm not talking about the one he has with the media man, I'm talking about the one he has behind the scenes in government. It's a different conversation than he will have with you. I can tell you that for sure.
Go ahead.
Now, the statistician general told us very clearly that we have a handful of NBS staff, a handful, right? Go to the NBS yourself and go and see what their employment roles look like. How many staff do they have to be able to send out into the nooks and crannies of the entire Nigerian Federation? To go out, they send out a handful of people, state by state by state, almost like NOA, trying to go to all the wards of all the local governments to count all the businesses and all the heads. You think that's being done? I can tell you from the mouth of the statistician general, the NBS, that is not being done.
Okay.
No, so he is now. Can we move beyond this? No, because you accused me of saying something wrong, and I'm telling you that I was not wrong. I was correct, and I'm telling you that allegation you made against me was false. Actually. So that's very important to me. I'm an honest person. So on top of all of that,
so I am.
Well, you were wrong this time.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So the issue here is that when the statistician general himself tells us in government that, look, we have a problem, we need first of all more funding and we need more manpower to be able to go out and get a more accurate count of what the unemployment rate in the country actually is. That is not me talking to you or deflecting blame. That's me telling you what the issues really are. So if you now tell me that the NBS is doing their jobs well and I'm trying to deceive people, I'm going to tell our viewers that you're wrong and that you should not make that allegation against my person.
Thank you very much. So far, Mr. Ajuri, when we talked about the shortfall of the government's economic recovery program, you lay the blame on the.
I did not. No, it's not about laying blame.
Let me finish.
It's about being honest.
Let me finish. You honestly lay the blame on the National Assembly. I mean, on the 8th National Assembly. When we talk about high rates of poverty in the country, you blame the statistics coming out of the National.
My brother, I see what you're trying to do.
Let's move beyond that. I want us.
No, this should not be a political.
Come on. I want us to move beyond there.
This should not be a political hatchet job. You're not working for the opposition.
Not at all.
Let's have an honest conversation.
When I said I don't speak for any opposition, please.
But it sounds
when I said no, not at all, because maybe if you are in government,
if you are saying I lay blame, that is not what I've been doing.
Excuse me, please.
Very clear
this
on the issue.
attitude that if someone says something that the government doesn't want to hear,
no, that is not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're making false
All these things I'm saying, they are entirely correct.
They are not entirely correct.
Then we can disagree on that. But can we move beyond these issues to the scale of the National Development Plan?
Thank you very much. That's what you brought me here to discuss.
Exactly.
Not these other things that you're
exactly. But it's also important to know what has gone before. Before we look at what is going on. Can we leave that and move on?
Ask me a question.
Can we move on,
please?
Yes. Thank you very much. So one of the most important things about the scale, of this current National Development Plan
Yes.
is the scale of it. You know, you're talking about 343 trillion naira. It is the very first time that we're having any kind of national development plan on such a huge scale. It is a huge scale on paper in terms of the investments that it seeks to make, but also scale, I mean huge in terms of the scale of the outcomes that are anticipated. 100 million people driven out of poverty, you know, millions of jobs created.
That's not part of this plan. I'm sorry, I have to correct you. That's
Okay,
not true.
that's fine.
The National Development Plan is not about 100 million people. The National Development Plan is a 4-year plan that deals with private and public sector investments across developmental sectors of the Nigerian economy. The 100 million that you're referring to is a 10-year aspirational pledge of President Muhammadu Buhari that far surpasses the National Development Plan of 4 years that we're talking about. The second thing I need to point out is at the beginning of this program, and this is why I said, those of us who have the privilege, and it's a privilege, not a right, any of us who are in front of viewers, who are influencing the opinions of Nigerians, we must be very careful about what we're saying and must be very accurate in what we're saying. So when we first started this program, the way you opened this segment, even before I was I began speaking, was that you gave the impression that President Muhammadu Buhari has only brought one national development plan and is coming at the end of his administration. That was not true.
That's also entirely correct. From an economist, excuse me,
it's not a development plan.
From an economist point of view, you don't call a program that is designed to get you out of a hole in which you had been dug into.
It's more
you don't
than
call
that.
that
You're
development
wrong.
plan.
It's more
development
than that.
plan
No.
is about forecasting.
You're wrong about that.
Okay, we can
ERGP
agree on that.
It's not about.
It's called economic recovery plan.
It's not about.
Can we take a break for a moment, please? Thank you very much. Just one moment. Thank you very much, viewers. This is very interesting, getting very hot. Sometimes our shows or guests on this program, things get quite heated. But again, it's in the spirit of democracy. It's in the spirit of free speech. It's in the spirit of your right to know. And also, of course, honesty, as you put it.
Hopefully.
We'll be taking a break for just a minute. When we return, we'll continue. Stay.
From all around the world,
our news is factual and concise,
giving you fresh news as it breaks.
Nigerians in the diaspora have the
Now, one tricycle rider feared death.
Troops fighting Boko Haram and ISWAP.
Although the government has made repeated commitments to make the country attractive.
When I sit on the news desk every day,
There's a deep sense of responsibility that overwhelms me.
a responsibility to deliver a message to our viewers.
In the most professional way possible.
Knowing that there's a lot of fake news flying around mainstream and social media daily,
We owe it to the public a responsibility to bring well-researched and responsible reportage to the table.
with Trust TV,
You're sure of a news and documentary channel you can trust.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV, and we're discussing the government's National Development Plan with Mr. Ajuri Inge-Lari, who is Senior Special Assistant on Public Affairs to the President Muhammadu Buhari. Before we went on break, we were just getting on to discuss the details, the finer details of the National Development Plan. For example, the scale. Why is it that you are having, what does the government wants to achieve with this scale, 343 trillion? What's the government thinking with respect to that?
Thank you very much. The National Development Plan is a 300 and approximately 348.1 trillion naira plan that involves 298 trillion over the course of the plan coming from the private sector, and approximately 49 trillion or so coming from the public sector, with a divide of about, I believe it's a 60-40 split there between the federal government and the state governments. And the key there is that at the end of the day, there are a few things that have to happen in this country in order for us to successfully build the kind of inclusive economy we want. One is that there's no magic. If you don't provide infrastructure, you're not going to have an economy to compete with the rest of the world that has the infrastructure on the ground. Infrastructure, that's power plants, roads, bridges, airports, seaports, dams, and the like. We must have those things. That's why President Muhammadu Buhari, even in spite of 2 economic recessions and a global pandemic and very limited oil revenues due to both OPEC quota as well as the general depression in oil prices consistently over the last 6 years plus, has been able to make significant investments in roads, bridges, airports, seaports across the country. I think most Nigerians have appreciated that we've made a lot of progress in that area, even though we have a very long way still to travel. So it's really the infrastructural backbone that you're able to provide that positions you to be able to attract the foreign direct investment that will have factories and industries sited in your country that will be massively employing your people across the country. That's where the jobs will come from. It's not going to come from government agencies recruiting young Nigerians. There's a limit to what government can employ, or the extent to which government can employ. So what this plan does is it says, look, we don't want to do pie in the sky. We don't want to say we have this magical figure and somehow it's going to work out. No. We're saying that we have to provide the instruments that will enable the private sector to have the confidence to come in. So, for example, I want to be very practical now. Under President Muhammadu Buhari's leadership, he had put in place some unprecedented initiatives to really attract private capital for public infrastructure development. So, for example, he established the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, which is currently constructing, start to finish really, the second Niger Bridge, 336 billion naira, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. I should mention the second Niger Bridge is going to be completed this year. It started 2017, it will be completed this year. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway will be completed this year, started 2018. And then the Abuja-Kaduna Zaria-Kano Expressway, phase 1 will be completed, I believe, first quarter of next year, and it will continue through, I think, 2 or 3 phases. So you have that. Then on top of the PIDF, you also have the Sukuk Fund, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, where we have Sukuk bonds taken out 100 billion plus a year, every year, being paid directly to road contractors for the development of 44 federal road projects across all states of the Federation. Then in addition to that, this is the one that's really helped move this progress forward, is the Presidential Executive Order 007, which is the road refurbishment tax credit scheme, in which essentially we provide calibrated tax relief to private sector companies who have the capital to invest upfront in public infrastructure. So, for example, we have NLNG providing the funding upfront for the construction of the 200 billion naira Boni Bodo Road, which will link NLNG and our gas production headquarters on Boni Island to the mainland of Nigeria for the first time in our nation's history. Something we've wanted to do for 40 years. We're going to do it and complete it within this administration. That's 200 billion. So they pay the money upfront to Julius Berger to do the work. Then we now give them back the money over a 10-year period through calibrated tax reductions on their tax bill. In addition to that, on the tax credit scheme, You also have the Kaba-Obajana Road, which we're going to be commissioning for completion next month in Kogi State, 43 kilometers. And then I think most strategically is the Apapa or Oronshoki Tollgate Road. 10-lane expressway done entirely with cement technology from Dangote. Dangote is the one putting the money up front, and then we'll give it back in calibrated tax relief. Almost a 100 billion naira road that's going to open up Apapa port to the rest of the country with 10-lane expressways, so we remove all that congestion that has been there for decades. So these are the measures that have started with President Muhammadu Buhari that he put in place for us to be able to unlock private capital to be invested in public infrastructure. And the reason is simple. We simply don't have enough money to deal with 50 years worth of infrastructural neglect and deficit. You have to think out of the box when you have limited revenues. How you're going to apply, yes, you apply government money through the budget, but you also have to find other ways of funding to be able to get us to where we want to go as quickly as possible.
Thank you. So, Bob, just as fact checked, the ratio of contribution between the private sector and the public sector on this plan, is 80 to 20%.
There's no fact check. That's what I said.
Not 60, 40.
No. You misunderstood me. That's not what I said.
That's all right.
No, I'm coming. I need to correct what you just said.
No, that's all right.
No, it's
that's
not
all right. I'm sure the viewers had the correction.
Wait.
That's all right.
Please, allow me to correct what you think I said. Please. Okay. It's for our viewers, not for you or for me.
Absolutely.
What I said was that, and anybody can go and look at the figures. I said them clearly. 298 trillion is the plan totally, right? I said very clearly that 249 trillion will come from the private sector. Less than 100 trillion will come from the public sector. I said that. So that is not the 60-40. When I said 60-40, I was referring to the split between within the government expenditure part. Approximately 60% is coming from federal, right, and 40% is coming from state. That is what I said.
That's all right. We can go ahead.
Yes.
So the thinking now is this.
Yes.
That you have about 80% of funding coming from the private sector, and then about 20% from both state and federal government combined. Now, the question is, where is that of the private sector coming from?
Right.
Is it going to come from more borrowings, given the fact that we have this government has engaged in a borrowing spree in the last 7 years of its administration? Is it going to be more borrowing, or is it going to be, where is that capital coming from?
Okay, so there are a few things here. What you call borrowing spree, let's acknowledge the fact that just if we're dealing with facts now, the fact that the period of our highest oil revenues in history, which is 2010 to 2015, that the government between 2010 and 2015 borrowed approximately $35 billion US. As of today, our administration over the course of the last 6 years, without those oil revenues and with social investment and infrastructure provided, we've borrowed approximately $33 billion US as of today. It's of course it is growing. You're correct about that. So the idea that we've borrowed more than any other administration is false. It's not a spree. It's approved by the National Assembly based on borrowing plans which clearly indicate what the borrowing is being used for. Unlike previous administrations that were borrowing to pay salaries, we are borrowing for capital projects that will ultimately be able to recoup the investment. So for example, we are borrowing to build the Lagos-Ibadan high-speed rail line that's going to run into Apapa port. The reason why we're confident in borrowing to do that is because we recognize that by moving millions of tons in cargo on that particular rail line, we're going to make the money that we invested in that particular project within the first 5 years of the project's implementation, meaning that after that 5 years, we're actually just going to be profiting from it. So massively as well. That's just one example. Same thing as Second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. These are going to be roads that are going to be tolled right after we complete them, meaning that you're going to have a mechanism for digital payment that would ensure that the monies that we borrowed are invested back. So we pay the loan, and then after we finish repaying the loan, we're making profit from it. So I need to differentiate when you talk about borrowing and how it was borrowed before and how we're borrowing now, the fact that we're also borrowing less than the previous administration despite having much less resources to deal with. That's one. Two is, you asked the question, how do we attract private sector capital? A good question. A major part of it is going to be the fact that we live in a unique moment in history in which we are seeing through the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Within that agreement, my brother, and this is verifiable, it's public information, that you have approximately $3 trillion US dollars, not 3 trillion naira, $3 trillion dollars that will be coming from international companies, factories, industries, and organizations across sectors coming into the African continent. We are currently in a mad dog race, a fight to the death, as it were.
How do you hope to attract these funds, given that everywhere in the world the global economy itself is quite, you know, in the doldrums, and many countries have not also recovered from their own economic issues during the pandemic. So how are you going to? Where is the foreign investment coming from?
Well, first of all,
if the foreign investors themselves are having problems right there at home in their own countries?
Well, first of all, yes, there's a pandemic, but pandemics these things are temporary, right? Like a recession, it doesn't last forever. A depression, it doesn't last forever. That's why you have, throughout the history of humankind, you have a recession that lasts for 2 years or a depression that lasts for 4 years, and it goes, and then 70 years later, there's another one. So that's how these things work, but eventually it will pass, right? And then we'll move on. So now where we are is this. The pandemic has not bankrupted every company in the world. There's a reason why Apple continues to see record profits. There's a reason why Tesla continues to see record profits. Google, name them, they see record profits. It's because even though there's a pandemic, Amazon, record profits. There's still commerce. There's a lot of commercial activity. In fact, if you look at the employment rates across Western Europe, across the West generally, even in North America, even now in Asia, you're seeing a recovery.
But these are tech companies, and tech companies have grown during the pandemic. Other companies or other sectors of the economy have not grown as much as tech companies. The reason why tech companies have grown is because the use of technology has increased, you know, several times during the pandemic. So is it from Amazon and Apple that you are going to get the capital, or from where?
Well, first of all, let's be abreast of the issues. If we're abreast of the issues,
it's just about time now.
You would probably know that Microsoft has already pledged over $100 million in Nigeria under this administration to build skill centers and also to build a regional tech space in this country. You would know that. You would know Google has made a similar investment. Facebook and Twitter are also opening offices in the country. So tech is very involved in Nigeria under this administration. That's number one. Number two is you have construction taking off around the world, even during the pandemic. That has not really slowed down that much. So we're going to continue to see that. What we need to do is we are scrambling with other African countries, which is the point I was making earlier. For the $3 trillion expected to come in, we're battling with the South Africas, the Kenyas, the Moroccos, and others. So what we have to do, there's no, like I said, there's no magic wand. You have to provide the infrastructure, because that's what's going to give you the competition. We already have one built-in advantage. We have 200 million Nigerians, the largest market in Africa. That's our advantage. Now we have to accompany that advantage with the infrastructure to match. And that is why the president is focused like a laser on infrastructural development, whether it is by borrowing, whether it is through capital, directly from budget. However we have to do it, let's get the infrastructure on ground so that we can bring in the factories and industries and organizations that will massively employ our people and create a sustainable, inclusive economy for all Nigerians.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jury. I think that brings us to, this is why we draw a curtain on today's program. One thing we've learned is that the government is borrowing to fund infrastructure from wherever it can find the funds, you know, whether it is through borrowing, whether it's through attracting foreign investment or foreign investors and so on.
To pay it back.
And yet, Nigerians are saying we haven't seen much, not much of that infrastructure.
Railways, roads, bridges, they haven't seen.
We haven't seen, we haven't seen much of the infrastructure because well, we have Kaduna to Abuja rail. We have a little of what do you call?
No, Lagos
Abuja, Lagos to Ibadan.
Rail line.
But in a country of 200 million people, Mr. Ajuri, in a country you are making this thing trivial. In a country of 200 million people, nobody will call this thing's achievement. In a country of 200 million people,
just be honest.
I'm not a PDP person. Every person who follows this program, every person who follows this program cannot describe me as a PDP person. And when PDP people, excuse me, when PDP people come here, I greet them exactly as I am greeting you. The point is that there are vacuums, there are a lot of gaps in the things you have said. And it is my job to point out those gaps, you know. But the program has ended. We will be inviting you again, and hopefully you will accept that invitation, and then we will have an opportunity to debate
we'll have an unbiased conversation.
And certainly you will have an unbiased conversation, just as today has been unbiased, largely.
I hope so.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Nigerians, for staying with us today. Has been very much interesting. Personally, I would say I have loved the way, the animated way in which he has spoken, because that is his job. But it's also
not my job. It's my patriotism. Please correct
It's
that.
also my job and my patriotism as a journalist to also stand up and point out things that where gaps are.
Hopefully.
Well, that's also correct. Thank you for staying with us. We hope you join us once again tomorrow when we bring you another edition of Daily Politics. My name is Suleiman Suleiman. Good night.